education, families, and America great again. Here's Ray.
Well, welcome to Ray Moore Live, and we're going to continue on with the discussion about the court system and the new judge, Brett Kavanaugh, who was nominated a couple of days ago by President Trump to fill the vacancy left by Justice Anthony Kennedy. And this is truly a momentous moment in modern American history, because usually a president gets to make one, maybe two appointments or nominations to the Supreme Court, but seldom do we see a president making two such nominations in his first year and a half, I guess, since he's been in office. So it's pretty unusual. And it looks like President Trump has a chance to put a real stamp on the court by the people he picks. And down through history, beside a foreign policy decision or something extraordinary like winning a war or being in some major foreign policy issue, probably appointments to the U.S. Supreme Court outweigh in terms of impact almost anything a president could do. And you can imagine the situation we would be in right now had Hillary Clinton won the election. We'd be facing the same circumstance, only we would be looking at very radical judges appointed in the vein of Obama. And we're going to take a look at that in a minute as we get into this memo that's posted here. Now, of the four finalists for the Kennedy position on the court, conservatives generally felt that Kavanaugh was probably the second best one in terms of his adherence to the Constitution. He'd been on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals for 12 years. He has made about 300 opinions. He's written 300 opinions. Those are like rulings, and you can study his thinking through those opinions. So he's got a voluminous record, more than the other three would have had. And generally it's looked upon to be decent and more conservative, and he looks like he'll be more in the vein of a Scalia or even a Kennedy, who was conservative on many things, but just was terrible on Obergefell. His ruling on same-sex marriage was so egregious that it sort of undermines any good that he might have done. But Kavanaugh is now being vetted, and he's being evaluated. He's making the rounds in the Senate right now, talking to the senators, and I'm thinking this will be concluded. The hearings and all will have to go on for months, will probably be hopefully concluded by sometime in October, when the new Supreme Court goes into session. So President Trump has a unique opportunity, and he might even have one or two more, because some of these judges there are very old now, in their 80s. And usually we see Kennedy retiring at 81. Not many people work a full-time job, even a judge in their 80s. So this is a big moment, and we're hopeful, even though he's was a kind of an establishment Republican, worked in the Bush White House, and some people that concerned some conservatives, but he was vetted and was supported by the Federalist Society, which was helping President Trump look at the different judges. So we're guardedly hopeful. It has been raised the question has been raised that we don't ever see any evangelicals considered for these positions. They're always usually Roman Catholics or of the Jewish faith. And right now, if you look at the court, I think there are 5 Catholics and 3 Jews on the court. And Clarence Thomas came to the court as a Catholic, but he currently attends an evangelical Anglican church, from what I understand. And I know his wife personally, and she's a very fine Christian woman. And many believe that Justice Thomas is really the best and most consistently pro-Christian conservative on the court today. So we hope that this man, if he is confirmed, will serve in the same vein as Justice Scalia, and would be a considerable improvement over Justice Kennedy, who was Kavanaugh had actually served as his clerk at one time. There's a lot written up about it, and it'll be a big news item for the next several months. And we have a picture of Kavanaugh walking into the Capitol, if you can put that up, in the Wall Street Journal today. I want that back in a few minutes because we're going to discuss this memo. But he is going around talking to the senators, and there's a big op-ed today by on the Wall Street Journal by David Rifkin and Andrew Grossman, entitled "A Champion of Constitutional Safeguards." So they're saying he's going to be a constitutionalist, and perhaps a tradition of a Scalia, where he sticks with the original text. He's an originalist, which means that he thinks the Constitution is the law of the land, and a textualist, which means that they look at the actual wording of the Constitution when they compare it to laws that are made. And those who are an originalist or textualist in the tradition of a Scalia believe that they don't have a right to make laws, which is what the left wing of the court has done for years. They just sort of summarily come up with things and make rulings that don't have any bearing on the law. I think the Obergefell case is a good example of that, where the years leading up to that case, which was, I think, settled 3 years ago, and we actually had an event for that on Raymore Live 3 years ago. It was handed down, and Justice Kennedy had written the opinion. And in the several years leading up to that, many states had referendum on same-sex marriage, including the state of South Carolina, I think, which had passed 81% here, which meant that 81% of the public wanted to maintain one man and one woman in marriage and not open up another category for same-sex marriages. Even California, as liberal as they are, they passed a similar referendum, I think about 52 to 48%, which is surprised many people since it's such a liberal state. So the public was not in favor of same-sex marriage when it passed. But you know, there's a saying that the law is a teacher. And so when it passed, it sort of flips the polling, and now it's become more popular. So the law is a teacher. These laws and these rulings actually have a bearing on how the public sees something. And we've seen public opinion change in favor of this over the years. So we're in a desperate situation. And we're going to take a minute now. I believe that Judge Kavanaugh will go through these procedures, and we're going to see it. It's going to be constantly in the news for the next, I'd say, through August, September, and into October. And we'll have hearings, and it looks like the Democrats are saying they're just going to summarily go against anybody that President Trump nominates, no matter what their qualifications are. Some are saying that Kavanaugh brings as many credentials in terms of his education and background to the court as anybody in recent decades. Part of the problem is that all of them seem to be graduates of Yale and Harvard Law School. There's a few exceptions, and those schools have gotten very liberal over the years. But occasionally, someone comes through has not been totally corrupted by that system. But they seem to go for the brightest and the best, no matter what their worldview or their politics are. But occasionally we have had good people come through that system, as Clarence Thomas and Judge Scalia are examples of some really outstanding originalist and conservative judges. So Kavanaugh will be going through the process, and my feeling is that he would probably be an asset, but we don't know what the long term would be. The Democrats historically always nominate liberal judges that never work out from a constitutionalist, originalist point of view. I think President Kennedy nominated Judge Byron White years ago as a Democrat, and he actually turned out to be a decent conservative, but he was probably the only exception. But Kagan, Ginsburg, Breyer, these are all Democratic nominations, and they are the very hard left wing of the court today. And but the sad thing is that the Republicans, half of their nominations are just as bad. And so vetting these people and determining ahead of time what they're going to be like is very difficult. I mentioned a couple of days ago in 1981, President Reagan's first appointment was Sandra Day O'Connor from the state of Arizona, and she was a senator there. And I guess he really felt like he wanted to break new ground and appoint the first female to the Supreme Court, which he indeed did. But he was warned by state senator, then Congressman Sean Conlin and others from Arizona, that she was not really pro-life and that she would disappoint President Reagan. But they said, no, we have other people telling us she's pro-life. And so the White House went ahead and made that appointment of Sandra Day O'Connor, and indeed she did not work out. She was a thorn in the Republican side all of her career on the pro-life issue. Kennedy is another example. He was appointed in a kind of a hurried way when one of Reagan's candidates didn't work out, and so he was a Reagan appointee as well, and he gave us the Obergefell case. So here's our most conservative president in modern times, President Ronald Reagan, up until today. And he gave us two really bad appointments to the Supreme Court. Now, to his credit, he, I think, elevated Rehnquist to Chief Justice, and he was a Scalia president. So he had some good ones, but about half of the Republicans don't work out. Blackmun was a Republican president. Nixon appointed him, and he was the one who wrote the Roe v. Wade ruling. So we have a mixed bag even with the Republicans. So sometimes it takes 5 or 10 years before we know what these judges will really do, because they are in a lifetime appointment, and so they're protected. They're not supposed to be influenced by the whims of doctrine in the political arena. Supposed to rule sincerely according to the Constitution, but it's really the only real controls they have is internal on themselves. Now, so far, Justice Gorsuch has really looked really good and seems to be working out fine. He's been on the good right side of most every ruling that's come up in the court, but we're going to have to wait 5 or 10 years probably to see just how good or bad Kavanaugh will be. All right, now we're going to switch a minute and look at this memo by American Renewal Project. It's along the same lines. And my friend David Lane has published this. This is really an exceptional memorandum in an article, and I'm going to make it available if you'll contact me in the office with through email at exodusmandate@gmail.com, or even call the office at area code 803-714-1744. We can forward this to you. I just got this a couple of days ago. Maybe it was actually after President Trump had made his nomination. And he discusses just how bad the court system is. Remember, we talked earlier, Article 3 of the Constitution talks about the courts, the Supreme Court, and lesser courts that might be created. President Obama did an extraordinary job in putting left-wing judges on the courts. And this memo describes just how bad it is. We have lower courts, the district courts that are at the state level, and the circuit courts, which take in regions. I live in the 4th Circuit. I think there are 10 circuit courts that take in 3, 4, 5 states apiece. Judge Kavanaugh, of course, sits on the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court. But here's what Harvard law professor said. With a sneer and gloating, he said, right now, more than half of the judges sitting on the courts of appeal were appointed by Democratic presidents. And though I wasn't able to locate an up-to-date number, the same appears to be true at the district courts. And those judges no longer have to be worried about reversal by the Supreme Court if they take aggressively liberal positions. The culture wars are over. They lost. That means us. The conservatives have lost and we have won. Remember, they were the ones who characterized constitutional disputes as culture wars. Remember, I told you earlier, my younger brother was serving at the Heritage Foundation as a top defense person when I started launching the Exodus Mandate Project, and was asking him, getting his advice on that. And he encouraged me to go forward with it. But he told me in 1996, he said, Ray, we, meaning the conservatives and the Christians, have lost the culture war. The left has won this war. We just don't know it yet. And they will take 30 or 40 or even 50 years to clean us up and finish us off. And by that, it means that they control all the opinion-forming, culture-shaping institutions in society. The court system, the media, which we now know is the fake news. They control the public school system in an extraordinary, harmful way. They control higher education, and they control the arts. And the only thing left to us in the evangelical conservative movement, we have the families. They have families. We have some universities, some Christian universities like Liberty, Bob Jones, Cedarville. There are many others. But that's a small number when you look at all the higher educational institutions in the nation. And we do have a burgeoning homeschool movement, which is taking in maybe 2.5 million children now. But when you've got 46 million children in public school, you can see how weighted it is against us. And then we have a private Christian school system, and we have half of the churches. The other half are controlled by the left. So they think they've won the culture war. And this memo shows us just how desperate it is in the courts. And so here's what this professor at Harvard says. For liberals, the question is how to deal with the losers. That's us, you and me. Now, I'm not conceding that we've lost. I'm just saying that we're in a real desperate situation. And I have ideas of how we can reestablish ourselves. And one way would be following the Exodus Mandate Project by getting all of our children, all the Christian and conservative children, out of the public school system and rebuild the foundations of the family and the churches from the ground up. There's no reason why we should be handing our children over to pagans for education. And so he says, goes on and says, my judgment is that taking a hard line to us, and here he says, you lost, live with it, is better than trying to accommodate the losers, that's us, who remember defended and are defending positions that liberals regard as having no normative pull at all. Trying to be nice to the losers, that's us, didn't work well after the Civil War, nor after Brown, meaning Brown versus Board of Education. Taking a hard line seemed to work reasonably well in Germany and Japan after 1945. See, they're putting us in with the Nazis and the fascists. So this is how those people think. Now let's go down and look at the court system. Scroll on down. See, there are 13 courts of appeal, and look at the appointments. The First Circuit have a total of 6 judges, 4 Democrats, and two Republicans. Now remember, the Republicans are not always good, but the Democrats are always leftist and liberal. In South Carolina, we have 10 district court judges, and 8 of them are more people of the left. Let's look at the Fourth Circuit, where I live. a total of 15 judges. And remember, these are right under the U.S. Supreme Court. So they make rulings and hear appeals, and only 70 cases are heard by the court every year. And if you add all these other courts up, there's hundreds of cases. 10 appointed by the Democrats and 4 by the Republicans. So the left has over half of the judges at the district and circuit court of appeals level. So even if Brett Kavanaugh works out wonderfully well, he can't change the demographics of the numbers at these lower circuit court and district court levels. And this is why the election of President Trump was so significant, because already he has added about 40 judges at the circuit and the district court level. And we have reason to believe that most of those will be of the strict constitutionalist variety, because he's been assisted in this by the Federalist Society, which is a constitutionalist group, and the Heritage Foundation. And generally speaking, they're not going to be perfect, but we won't see as many leftists being recommended by those groups. All right, let's scroll on down a little bit more. So this shows you how desperate the situation is. All right, here's Senator McConnell saying only about 20 years in the last 100 have Republicans had control of the White House, the House, and the Senate at the same time. So the Democrats and the left have had an overwhelming domination. All right, you can see the numbers. Let's go on down a little bit more. Here's why this is important. And he uses the Obergefell versus Hodges case as an example. The Democrats can't win politically. We already showed that. Right before the Obergefell case, there were probably a dozen states that had referendum on same-sex marriage, and in every case, our side won. Now, go to the next paragraph. Christian leaders who call for a third party or never Trump vote in 2016 appeared oblivious to the impending consequences of a Hillary Clinton presidency. Now, who were those never Trumpers? Well, that include people like Russell Moore of the Ethics and Religious Liberty, Al Mohler of Southern Baptist Seminary, Marvin Olasky, Tim Keller, the Gospel Coalition. These people actually in September of 2016, right before the election, called on President Trump to step down and called on Christians not to vote for him because of his bad language and apparently moral misbehavior. And they were willing to hand the country over to Hillary because of that. And I think they've not changed their ways. They're now even continuing to be never Trumpers. And we're going to have to deal with these people because they don't seem to understand the consequences of the court system and public policy and what it means for the moral well-being of our country. They're not to be trusted and not to be followed. All right, let's go down to the very last part. No halfway measures can be taken against the antagonists of freedom. And this is a quote from A.W. Pink. And this is the way Christians really operate in Black. It is often the experience of Christians when they have particularly been active in engaging the enemy and a notable victory has been obtained, say, for example, Trump winning in 2016, the Lord grants a brief season of rest and quietness. Yet they are not to conclude that the hardest part of the conflict is over, so that it is now safe to relax and go back to sleep. And Satan does not rest. And so we've only won a reprieve in this court battle. And this battle that we're in could take 50 to 100 years. And Christians just don't seem to have the stomach for it. So I wanted to put this memo out for you to look at it and write me or contact me for it, and we will forward it to you. It's a very profound memo written and provided by David Lane of the American Renewal Project. And I urge you to get on their email list. I hear from them about once a week, and some of the best things I read come from the American Renewal Project. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. Let's get some questions and some rebuttals or something more on this.
Yeah. Well, Ray, there's something I forget. Vince Vince, you might know this. It's called like the Overton window, and the way that they've done this, the way that they achieve this, is they do like what is it, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, and then they get what they want, and then they do 5 steps forward, So we think we win, and then the left has this view, a 20-year view, and they're saying, fine, we'll give you this win, we'll give you Trump, we'll give you this, and we're too stupid to figure it out.
Yeah, that's right. We really, the political victories only give us a chance to make the cultural change. Paul Weyrich, who was one of the great political leaders in the country, and I knew him pretty well. He passed away, I think, in 2008, maybe. And a year before he died, we were talking at a large leaders meeting, and he was the guru of the Christian and conservative political right, meaning that he had schools where he trained hundreds of people to run for governor, U.S. Senate, Congress, and he just populated the government with elected officials who held our worldview. And he told me a year before he died, and I quote it often, he said, "Ray, you're doing the right thing by trying to grow homeschooling and Christian schooling." He said, even when we, meaning the conservatives and Christians, win elections, we still lose in the end because culture always trumps politics. Culture is upstream from politics. So if we just fight the politics, we're going to lose. We've got to change the culture, and we've got to fight for the culture. And the only way to do that, my friends, is to get the kids out of the government schools and get them into Christian schools and homeschooling. We cannot win as long as the left have our children. And they've got 46 million of them. 46 million of them right now.
That's right. That's the important thing. The children are our future. We need to shape the future, not them.
Right. Hey, Vincent, sure appreciate you being on with us today. And I did mail you a package a few days ago. I don't know if you've had a chance to get it yet, but it should arrive.
I didn't receive it yet, but I'm looking. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Just want to let you know all that we've done, and we gave you more information you probably have time to read. But this is a very important thing. And this memo just shows how steep the climb is in the court system. This one judge at the U.S. Supreme Court level, if he indeed works out, and we hope he will, but, again, we've seen half of the Republicans' appointments have not worked out very well, such as Sandra Day O'Connor and Justice Kennedy. Again, he was a mixed bag. The harm he did with the Obergefell versus Hodges case was so serious, a damage to our culture and our country, that it sort of undoes all the good rulings he made, and he had many. So anything else? We're probably getting close to time to close. We do have a couple minutes more. Okay, we may continue this discussion more tomorrow, and I hate to spend 3 days on the same topic, but this is extremely important. And by spending so much time on it, it lets our audience know how important it is. The courts really have too much control, and they're now the dominant branch of government when, as I said earlier, they were not supposed to be at the founding era, but we still have to deal with it the way it is and worry about how we can change it at this particular level. One way is to try to put some good people in the court system, and President Trump is doing that apparently, and trying. Doesn't mean they're all going to be everything we want, and we're disappointed we don't have more evangelical Christians. But part of the problem is we don't have any that can get to the level that some of these judges are being considered or at that level. All right. That's it. We'll go ahead and close in prayer, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Father, for this memo from David Lane. And thank you for the good work he's doing at the American Renewal Project, and helping us understand just how enormous this mountain is that we're dealing with. And we thank you that the president seems to be doing as much as he can at this point. We pray that you would help him have wise counselors on these appointments, that they would not be disappointing us as so many of the Republican appointments have in the past, that we'd have some true constitutionalists and originalists and textualists in there. And God, we pray you'd give us some Christian men and women who love you and know you. It would bring not only to their craft and to their work a a belief in the Constitution, but also be men and women of prayer who would seek your face. And we'll be pleased to give you the praise for that in Jesus' name. All right, this is my